Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. And, well, there's obviously really just going to be one story we're going to be talking about tonight, and that's Justin Trudeau enacting the Emergencies Act here in Canada. Previously, before it was renamed and the scope kind of limited, it was actually the War Measure Act. Only hindsight will tell what this really means for all of us, but I can't help but feel like February 14th, 2022 is going to be remembered in Canada as a turning point. Maybe it's a turning point for the better, maybe it's for the worst. Again, I think only time will really tell, but I guess we've got a bunch of different stories to cover here today, but they're all going to relate around this. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys the actual news conference where Justin and Christina were essentially announcing the Emergency Act. I'm going to share a couple clips from that. We're also going to be talking about how essentially the Liberals and the Canadian MPs at the federal level were faced with a choice with two different paths to take at this moment in time. And I can't help but feel they chose the darker path, and I'll share and get deeper into that. We'll also have some trucker convoy updates. Yeah, crazy shit going on. And I guess for context, let's maybe just frame this a little bit for everyone. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinion. So jump in that comment section. Let me know what your hot take is. I'm definitely disturbed by some of the language I heard coming out. I'm also even just disturbed by the smile or smirk on Chrystia Freeland's face when she was making these announcements. If this was truly an emergency that justified these actions, I feel like there should have been a much more somber tone involved, but here we are. So today, Justin Trudeau, the federal Liberals, and to a lesser extent, all federal MPs were faced with a choice. We had the CPCs putting forward a non-binding Parliament, essentially asking for the Liberals to come with an exact plan on when all these mandates, when all these restrictions would be wrapped up, what sort of timeline we could expect, as well as, are there certain thresholds or items around that fact? We saw that both the federal Liberals as well as the federal NDP party voted that down, where the CPC and Bloc were together pushing for it. And alternatively, Justin went ahead and announced the Emergencies Act. I'm going to be breaking down for you guys exactly what that means. We'll also actually have the press conference where you can get better understanding. But understand that the last time this was used, and the only time it was ever used domestically or for a domestic situation, was when Trudeau Sr., when Pierre Trudeau used it back in 1970 during the PLQ. And I don't expect everyone to remember that perfectly. But highlights here is, let's compare what's going on right now with the Freedom Convoy and the truckers versus what was going on with the PLQ. The PLQ was literally kidnapping people. They were literally killing people, and they were planting bombs in mailboxes and things to that extent. On the flip side, we've got the trucker protest, which arguably could be seen as a couple different movements, but we've got the main movement in Ottawa, we've got the Coots Alberta movement, we've got what's going on in Windsor, and then we've seen several other border crossings spring up with their own individual blockades as well. So right now, if you were to ask me my hot take, I would tell you it doesn't feel like an apples to apples comparison to compare 1970s Quebec and Canada versus today. But that's my hot take. I think you guys know I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this. But if you've been on the fence about defending freedom, if you've been on the fence about speaking out, speaking your mind, understand that this is absolutely a turning point in Canada's future. And again, I want to hope that things turn out better, that we see even more backlash, not just amongst Canadians, but actually from the international community condemning what Trudeau is doing here. Because understand, literally, we're now, 2.5, arguably 3 weeks into this protest, and he's never once been willing to show the humility of actually discussing or opening up discussion channels with these protesters. He's constantly just doubled down on his rhetoric that they're misogynist, that they're racist, that they're a fringe minority. And we've never seen him back off in that language. At best, what we're seeing these days is him essentially referring to the fact that all Canadians are frustrated with what's going on. And I can't help but feel that there's an extra level of just clown world or clown pill to all this as we're seeing the rest of the world open up. As we literally saw the Super Bowl this weekend in LA, where was it 70 or 80,000 plus people in the stands, almost none of them wearing masks. And yet here we are in Canada. And if I understand, it's hard to keep track of all the rules, but I'm pretty sure I'm still not allowed to have 10 people over. So while 70 or 80,000 people could congregate in LA for a Super Bowl, I literally couldn't have 10 people over to my house legally to watch the Super Bowl. We live in very strange times, and freedom is paramount to any of the pleasures that we have in Canada. Like, understand that we don't live in a vacuum, and it's the ability for individuals to have sovereignty, to pursue opportunities, to take on risks and reap the rewards from those risks that allow us to live in the abundance that we do here in Canada, as well as just across the West in general. But enough preamble, let's jump into it. And what I want to cover off first here, guys, this is from iPolitics. And again, as always, links in the video description down below to everything I'm going to share with you tonight. But Liberals, NDP reject Tory motion requesting COVID exit plan. And understand, this was going to be actually still a non-binding move. So literally, they care so little about what's going on. And the extra level of irony or clown pill on this, in my opinion, is in all probabilities, barring a new variant or a new narrative emerging from the mainstream corporate press legacy media, I suspect that in 3 or 4 months, at least temporarily, we'll be in a much more normal version of the world that we kind of remember from back in 2019. And yet I truly feel like it's the hubris of politicians, their unwillingness to show any sort of give, to show any sort of weakness, to, appear fearful in front of the masses, that they're absolutely refusing to even have open conversations with the truckers, with the protesters. But from this iPolitics article, the House of Commons has voted down a Conservative motion asking the government to table a plan to end all COVID-19 restrictions by the end of the month. The Bloc Québécois voted with the Tories for their motion, but the Liberals and New Democrats voted against it on Monday. And so again, understand that this didn't have to be the path we took. The Emergencies Act wasn't the only option available. And again, 2 weeks ago, had Trudeau been a more humbler version of himself, had he been willing to actually have open and honest dialogue with the Canadians that are frustrated, that don't understand the logical framework that's being used to come to these conclusions, I really do think that this could have been avoided. However, the black pill version of me believes that there's more to the story than meets the eye, that we're really just seeing the tip of the iceberg in regards to why this is all playing out. I shared on my Instagram stories that over this weekend, I believe it was the Moderna CEO, right, that sold over $400 million worth of shares over the last couple of weeks. We've seen Pfizer come out saying that with some predictions to potential negative downside in regards to their stock and earnings if unfavorable narratives essentially come out around the vaccines. But we'll save all that for future days and future news updates. Next, I want to highlight just in general how language is being weaponized against Canadians. So this is from the Post-Millennial, but it's citing the CBC. So CBC experts warn against far-right connotations of the word freedom. So Trudeau's state broadcaster, the CBC, said in an article released on Sunday that freedom has become a rallying cry used among far-right groups. So literally, we're at the point in time now where one side of the argument believes that literally the word freedom is far-right, that the idea that you should want individual sovereignty, that you should be able to make your individual medical decisions, that you should be free to travel as you see fit, that you should be free in order to take a personal measure of risk and reward and come to your own conclusion. And while I understand sometimes this maybe seems abstract for people, let's break it down in another way. Right now, it would seem asinine if you didn't have the risk-reward proposition of choosing your own career. But again, at what point in time could we see governments just seep in their power into other areas of our life? It's very rare. It's almost impossible to find examples where governments freely give up power without any pressure from their citizenry, right? And so often we see temporary measures enacted that end up becoming long-term measures. I guess one of the most common ones that come to mind these days is, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And now we're more than 2 years deep into it, essentially. And again, this is what's so concerning when we see the government enacting things like the Emergencies Act, which is supposed to be temporary. But I think we've seen how temporary really is when it comes to government officials. So let's jump over to the actual news conference. Now, there's a link in the video description down below to the whole thing. It's about an hour and a half long. I just want to focus on really what the Liberal government is telling us at this point in time their intentions are in regards to using the Emergencies Act. And so this was all from Christia Freeland. And I've got this at 1.75 speed, so just an FYI.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Hello, everyone. Across the world, liberal democracies are being confronted with serious and repeated threats. We thought, and we perhaps even hoped, that Canada would be spared. For the last 2.5 weeks, we have realized that this is not the case. This siege and these blockades are causing major damage to our economy and are harming our democratic institutions as well as Canada's reputation in the world. International confidence towards Canada as a good place to invest.
Shit. Sorry, guys. I just realized my audio wasn't on there. All I was trying to say was essentially highlighting the fact that if I wanted to be blackpilled in this moment, I would focus on the fact that, hey, you know what? The last 2 weeks, you're telling us that our democracy's been in peril, that our economy's been impacted by these blockades. What about the last 2 years, right? What about the generation of children that we're sacrificing on the altar of perceived or hoped safety? What about the small businesses that will never come back, right? We just saw, and we covered it last week, where we saw bankruptcies, small business bankruptcies were up at an all-time high, I believe up over 36% year over year in last quarter.
And do business has been shaken.
Barricades are doing great damage to Canada's economy and to our reputation as a reliable trading partner. The blockade of the Ambassador Bridge has affected about $390 million in trade each day. This bridge supports 30% of all trade by road between Canada and the United States, our most important trading partner. In Coutts, Alberta, about $48 million in daily trade has been affected by blockades. In Emerson, Manitoba, about $73 million in daily trade has been affected by the blockades. These costs are real. They threaten businesses, big and small, and they threaten the livelihoods of Canadian workers, just as we are all working so hard to recover from the economic damage caused by COVID. Nous nous sommes battus bec et ongle.
We fought so hard to protect Canada's privileged relationship with the United States when we were negotiating NAFTA. We stood up to Tariff 232, which...
It's also fascinating how much they've focused on our trade with the United States here and the impact in NAFTA. Again, we saw a lot of narratives coming out over the weekend that the Biden administration was very frustrated with Trudeau and his government's handling of this situation up until this point in time. So again, it stood out to me as a stark example of how focused they were in regards to talking about the trade impact here. And again, completely ignoring the human impact of the last 2 years of lockdown.
Which were illegals and unjustified. We will never let those hard-won victories be tarnished. The world is watching us. Our jobs, our prosperity, and our livelihoods are in danger. That is why our government is acting. We are resolute and determined. These illegal blockades must be lifted, and they will be.
Invoking the Emergencies Act, we are announcing the following immediate actions. First, we are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use. These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies. The illegal blockades have highlighted the...
So understand that Canada, who essentially is one of the capitals of the world for money laundering through real estate, but $10 million gets raised by protesters and truckers, and that's a line too far, right? And yet we see estimates that maybe $200 million plus every year minimum is laundered through Canadian real estate. And again, this is just so disingenuous, in my opinion. Like, as Minister of Finance, she should already be aware of this fact that Canada is a hotbed. We've literally had, like, we're seeing now in like world regulators are naming different types of scams and money laundering after Canada, after Canadians, because it's so prevalent in our country. And yet this is the line in the sand. And understand that this is going to be used. I guess this is black-pilled Matt now, but in my opinion, this is going to be used far beyond what we're hearing it encompass at this moment in time. And we're past the point of slippery slope. We're literally getting into the government knowing every aspect of your financial life. And if you're okay with that, I can only come to one of two conclusions. You're either a fascist or you've never studied or don't understand history whatsoever.
The fact that crowdfunding platforms and some of the payment service providers they use are not fully captured under the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act. Our banks and financial institutions are already obligated to report to the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada, or FINTRAC. As of today, all crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use must register with FINTRAC, and they must report large and suspicious transactions to.
And just remember here, as she's talking about large and suspicious transactions, this is coming from the same administration, the same government that essentially gave $43.5 million to the We Charity, which actually gave Trudeau and his extended family over $400,000 in compensation and free trips. That also gave the previous finance minister over $48,000, if I remember correctly, in free trips and free comps, and also hired his daughter right out of university. Yeah. And yet they want us to have to disclose every single aspect of our lives. How about they maybe clear the log out of their eye first before talking about the speck in our own?
FINTRAC. This will help mitigate the risk that these platforms receive illicit funds, increase the quality and quantity of intelligence received by FINTRAC, and make more information available to support investigations by law enforcement into these illegal blockades. We are making these changes because we know that these platforms are being used to support illegal blockades and illegal activity, which is damaging the Canadian economy. The government will also bring forward legislation to provide these authorities to FINTRAC on a permanent basis. Second, the government is issuing an order with immediate effect.
So again, understand that this temporary matter of the Emergencies Act is creating a permanent measure as well.
Under the Emergencies Act, authorizing Canadian financial institutions to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account is being used to further the illegal blockades and occupations. This order covers both personal and corporate accounts. Third, we are direct.
So understand that, right? Like literally at this point in time, the banks have the mandate that they can essentially freeze any account that they suspect of doing anything to do with supporting the truckers or the convoy. Again, how long until we see this applied to other protests, to other movements, and how long before, say, the PPC party, right, that's been a day one supporter of Canadian freedoms and rights, until they're just classified as a fringe minority of, domestic terrorists, essentially at this point in time is how it's being framed, right? This won't end here. And I'm going to get into a whole spiel about why you need to get into Bitcoin in order to start protecting yourself from this. But understand that when the government starts feeling comfortable just freezing any bank account as they see fit, that's when we're in full-blown tyranny, because the ability for them to essentially apply pressure or scare any opponent becomes a magnitude of power stronger than what they previously had in their toolbox.
Canadian financial institutions to review their relationships with anyone involved in the illegal blockades and report to the RCMP or CSIS. As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
So again, without a court order, they'll be able to freeze any bank account. So again, maybe you gave to GiveSendGo, maybe you gave to GoFundMe, maybe you gave to Honk Honk Hodl. If they can trace that back to you, for all we know, they may start freezing your bank accounts. This is wild. This is unacceptable. And all Canadians, all people, like even if you don't live in Canada, if you're just watching this for shits and giggles, you need to speak out, because understand if the Canadian government is allowed to get away with this and they use it to the full extent that they potentially can based upon the Emergencies Act, we are going to see other governments, particularly Australia and New Zealand, probably first come to mind, looking towards essentially cribbing from Canada's playbook.
In doing so, they will be protected against civil liability for actions taken in good faith. Federal government institutions.
And what do you define good faith as? Anything that they suspect as being suspicious. But again, understand that these same banks and financial institutions have been looking the other way for literally years. Hell, we're in decades now at this point in time in regards to the money laundering going on with Canadian real estate, the Chinese triads, and again, you guys need to read Willful Blindness, that book, if you haven't read it yet, from Sam Cooper. He does an excellent job of breaking down the craziness that is Canada's real estate and money laundering syndicate.
Institutions will have a new broad authority to share relevant information with banks and other financial service providers to ensure that we can all work together to put a stop to the funding of these illegal blockades.
So again, reading between the lines here, I can't help but feel like what she essentially laid out was, if one bank flags you, they're allowed to talk to the other banks and be like, yo, bro, we flagged him. We think he's suspicious. Don't worry, we're acting in good faith. You should probably flag him too. Again, if we see them actually using these powers, there are significant consequences to our democracy, to our individual freedoms.
This is about following the money. This is about stopping.
And it's just so cute to hear her say following the money when they've never followed the money when it comes to real estate money laundering.
The financing of these illegal blockades. We are today serving notice. If your truck is being used in these illegal blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. Send your semi-trailers home. The Canadian economy needs them to be doing legitimate work, not to be illegally making us all poorer.
But again, the Canadian economy didn't need them crossing the borders, and that's why we implemented the vaccine mandate on truckers crossing the border, right?
Il s'agit de suivre la...
It's all about following the money. It's about putting an end to the funding of these illegal blockades. Consider yourselves warned. If your truck is used in these blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. Send your rigs home. The Canadian economy needs them to do legitimate work and not make us all poorer illegally. We've enforced taken these measures after deep thought. I have discussed this with the heads of Canadian banks. I thank them for doing what is necessary to ensure laws are being complied with and that Canadian democracy is being protected as well as our economy.
The past 2 years, we have trusted one another. We've leaned on one another. What we are facing today is a threat to our democratic institutions, to our economy, and to peace, order, and good government in Canada. This is unacceptable. It cannot stand, and it will not stand. Thank you. And I'll now turn over the floor to my colleague, our Attorney General, Minister of Justice.
So again, I encourage you guys, go watch the entire press conference. There's a lot of information covered in it. None of it is good from my perspective, but again, maybe I'm too black-pilled. Let me know in the comment section. But this feels like we're past the point of a slippery slope. And I just, especially after seeing the NDP carry water for the Liberals today in Parliament in regards to this CPC's request in order to actually have a definitive timeline put together, ideally by the end of the month, laying out when restrictions and mandates would be pulled back. I can't help but feel that this is going to continue for an extended period of time. This is not the Canada I grew up in. This is not the Canada I want to live in. And again, I can't help but wonder how soon until it becomes, it's not just a matter of if you financially supported them, if you tweeted out the wrong thing, if you made a YouTube video supporting them, if you did this, that, or the other. Again, we're supposed to be allowed to have differing opinions. We're supposed to be able to have the freedom of protest. Now, again, whether you agree or disagree with some of the blockades at the border, understand that this was kind of used as a last resort. It's not like the truckers went there day one to shut down the borders. They, in fact, went to Ottawa. They had a giant cross-country convoy in the hopes that Justin Trudeau would actually sit down in open dialogue with them. Instead, at every turn, he chose to be divisive. At every turn, he decided to demonize those that disagreed with him. At every turn, he decided to put himself and his supporters on a pedestal and the rest of Canadians as a fringe minority, essentially the unwashed masses that don't deserve your respect or even your consideration. And I'm so fucking done with it. So switching gears here, this is from Rebel News. So if you guys missed it, the Freedom Convoy organizers held a preemptive press conference, and Brian Peckford was one of the speakers because they essentially knew, because it had been leaked to the press, because it had already been discussed with the first ministers, the individual premiers of each province. It's about a 15-minute clip. I encourage you guys to go watch it as well. Now what I wanted to highlight, this is actually from the Government of Canada's website, under the Justice. So this is breaking down exactly what the Emergencies Act entails. And understand, it's a broad, sweeping directive the government now has. They will have to vote on it in Parliament eventually. I believe, if I remember correctly, in the next 7 days, they'll be voting. But this essentially covers a 90-day period in theory. Now, Justin Trudeau has said that they're going to be very limited in their scope, and they're only going to focus on the financial aspects that Christia laid out for us. Personally, again, I don't trust them. I don't see why I should trust them at this point in time when they're not willing to have open dialogue with us, when they've lied to us at every turn up until this moment in time, and they seem to gaslight us at any chance they get, right? Understand, like, I was going through some of the mainstream press's coverage today, and I just didn't have time to break it down and share it in today's video. But, like, they're talking about, Ottawa citizens aren't safe walking the streets. And yet, when we look at actual police reports, we see that reported crimes are down since the protesters arrived in Ottawa. And it's this dichotomy of narratives here that's doing no one any good. But I truly believe that only one side is even interested in presenting the truth, and the other side is only interested in protecting themselves, protecting their jobs, protecting their mandates, protecting the insiders. So I encourage you guys, go read Section 8, where essentially it lays out all the orders and regulations that this encompasses. But essentially, in theory, they can seize property, as they mentioned, in regards to the vehicles. Again, they, in theory, could seize other real property as well. They've got the authorization to use funds at a greater discretion than they've had previously. They can evacuate individuals or remove people or personnel. It's very concerning when you spend a little bit of time reading through this, and I encourage you guys to do so. Now, David Anber is a lawyer that I really respect. He shared some of his thoughts and opinions. When he laid it out preemptively before the government made their announcement, he stated he doesn't believe that they've met that threshold. And as we saw previously with Brian Peckford in that video I shared with you guys, he's the only living signatory on the Charter of Freedoms and Rights here in Canada. He also believes that the government essentially restricting our charter rights based upon the pandemic also wasn't justified because they need to demonstratively, right? That's a word that he constantly focuses on. And he brings it up in that new press conference as well. So then iPolitics broke down their interpretation of things. So this is Process Nerd, PM to Invoked Emergencies Act. What's next? So I'll leave you guys if you're interested in checking that out. National Post, Emergencies Act explained how it would help quell protests and unblock borders. Again, honestly, when it was question period with Trudeau, I didn't see the smoking gun that even explained exactly how this was going to allow them to shut down the blockades, other than the fact the ability to cancel the insurance and seize the trucks, and then essentially going after anyone and penalizing them that potentially financially supported the truckers and the blockades and the Freedom Convoy. And then another one from National Post, caution must be taken against overreach. Premiers react to Trudeau's call of Emergencies Act. So Alberta, Quebec, and Manitoba provincial leaders speak out against invoking the never-before-used act. And as I mentioned, this has literally never been used before. And if we essentially group it in with the War Measures Act in Canada, it's only the second time in history that's been used for a domestic affair. The rest of the times all related to like World War I, World War II, and I don't even think we used it in the Korean War. But anyways, understand that this is a very unique moment in time. It's never been used essentially since it was created. And previously, again, 1970 was the last time anything like it was used here in Canada. CTV News, Emergencies Act, not necessary in Manitoba. Premier Heather Stephenson says. So again, understand that it's not unanimous across the provinces, the support of this, right? And we even saw Jason Kenney, I believe, over the weekend, calling out the fact that some of the counter-protesters were waving the hammer and sickle and essentially asking, how does that compare to, say, a Confederate flag? I don't know if he made that exact comparison. That's maybe my narrative there. But this all leads me down to, if you guys have been supporting the truckers or thinking about supporting the truckers, if you've not been liking what you see going on in Canada, or maybe you're just sick of inflation, right? Maybe you're just sick and tired of the government lying to you about transitory inflation. Use February 14th, 2022, a day that I hope will live on in infamy here in Canada, that we'll never forget the evil our government was willing to perpetrate against us under the guise of doing it for our own good. use this as motivation to finally start learning about Bitcoin. I've got a link in the video description down below to my completely free e-guide talking about getting started with Bitcoin for Canadians. Now, I understand Bitcoin purists and Bitcoin maxis will say you need to get your Bitcoin as non-KYC, so like not a know your customer sort of Bitcoin. That's a lot more difficult for the average person. I'd rather see you just start learning, then maybe eventually start dabbling with some KYC, and then bring that into self-custody, right? Into a cold storage wallet. And we talk about that stuff in the Game Started with Bitcoin. Again, all you do is click, scroll up here. You can read now or you can download it completely free. And last year, actually, in I think it was May of 2021, when I saw some of the new press releases coming out from Doug Ford, I personally started to become more black-pilled than I'd ever been in my life and realized, like, fuck, Canada is headed down a trajectory that I don't like, and I don't see how we get ourselves out of it. So I literally created a free conference called SOS BTC, which stood for Stack or Sync Bitcoin Takeover Canada. Again, it's about 2 hours long, completely free. It's a little goofy at times, and we're trying to have fun with it. I plan on rolling out another free Bitcoin conference in the near future here on the Unfiltered channels, because this is so important. If the government feels comfortable essentially having complete control over your personal finances, I don't see how they're ever going to let off the gas on that sort of power. And so I think that Bitcoin and self-custody is one of the few, if only, measures that you as an individual citizen have at your disposal. Now, if you want to go down the rabbit hole of being a gold bug or a silver bug, all the power to you, but understand that's a lot easier to seize and confiscate versus a cold storage Bitcoin. So again, really encourage you guys, if you've been like, I hear Matt going on and on about Bitcoin, but I just roll my eyes, or it feels too complicated, or I'm not a computer hacker, use this as motivation to get control of something in your life. Right now, the government's trying to take control of every aspect of your life, including your financial autonomy. Use this as motivation to start taking back some of your freedom, to becoming more sovereign than you've been in the past. And speaking about some of the craziness going on, I want to give you guys an update. So if you somehow missed it, GiveSendGo was hacked over the weekend, and essentially a lot of individuals' private information was leaked. The website was redirected as well. So this is from CBC News. Hack Convoy data shows more than half of donations came from U.S. Canadians donated more cash than Americans to the protest, however. Now, again, I encourage you guys to go read this thoroughly, but a couple points I just wanted to make was, one, yeah, Canadians donated more cash than Americans. So even though there was more individual American donors, there weren't large American donors making huge lump sum donations to the convoy. Second, understand that this was the second financial campaign after GoFundMe was essentially stopped, right? And there was a 7 to 10 day holding period where some people weren't getting their money back for 7 to 10 days after they initially donated to the original Convoy fundraiser. So again, I can't help but feel like probably some people got confused. Some people were probably discouraged, right, from wanting to donate a second time after seeing the funds frozen the first time. And then essentially a forced refund occurred. So I think it's disingenuous for CBC to want to only paint this narrative without diving deeper into it. And as a counterbalance, I want to highlight the Western Standard, which says no large foreign entity donors in GiveSendGo data. The Freedom Convoy has gained attention from around the world, and it kind of highlights and breaks down how, yeah, Americans were definitely the second biggest supporters of the Freedom Convoy after Canadians, but also understand they are our closest trade partner, right? And honestly, I suspect that a lot of Americans only donated after they said the tyrannical, the tyranny that Trudeau implemented in regards to essentially forcing Trudeau and the mayor of Ottawa enforcing GoFundMe to, at first, pause the funds and then refund the funds afterwards. So again, I think there's much more to it. Like, we didn't see it being picked up by Ron DeSantis or Ted Cruz or a lot of American politicians until after that first incident occurred. So again, I can't help but feel like a lot of this was probably a result of a reaction to already what was a government interference, right? This is from Timcast. GiveSendGo redirecting to GiveSendGone following Freedom Convoy donor data breach. The information of thousands of GiveSendGo donors has been sent to a leaked website. So Christian funding platform GiveSendGo Go is down after a cybersecurity breach led to the distribution of private donor information. This is just terribly unfortunate. I feel very bad for anyone that got doxxed during this. And again, I think we should all just use this as motivation to really look at our financial houses, make sure we're getting our shit in order, make sure that we're as financially sovereign as we're capable of being. And that's going to look different for each individual. But at a minimum, I don't see any excuse for any freedom-loving Canadian at this point in time to not become educated about Bitcoin. Maybe you become educated and you decide it's not right for you. Maybe you get educated and decide, hey, I just have no money. I'm not going to be able to stack enough sats to justify it. So be it. I disagree with that, but so be it. But at least make sure you're making an informed decision to not make an informed decision choosing not to get into Bitcoin. And ideally, I'd love to see more Canadians get into Bitcoin. Now, let's talk about just some general trucker updates. So again, link in the video description down below. I think True North is doing some of the best daily updates in regards to what's going on. So they've got their recap of day 21 of the Truckers for Freedom Convoy. And there was a lot of crazy shit that went down this weekend, even before the Emergency Act. So we saw reopened Ambassador Bridge, sees traffic moving freely as city signs emergency order. So again, we had the province of Ontario sign emergency order. We had the city of Windsor, and now we've got the Emergency Act being enacted in Canada as well. These are truly unprecedented times in Canada. This is from Matt Teebe. And again, I love his Substack. Really encourage you guys to check it out. The Great International Convoy Fiasco. As America puts the Canadian Prime Minister's unmentionables in a vice over a truck protest, it's clearer than ever the world's leaders have forgotten how to govern. And again, I think he makes some great points, but just want to hit upon the end summary here. So as for talking to protesters, that's out of the question. As Politico recently put it, the conspiratorial mindset of the demonstrators means sitting down with them could legitimize their concerns. Yeah, how dare those conspiracy theorists want their individual freedoms and sovereignty back? Since we can't, under any circumstances, have that, the only option left is the military eventuality. Or, as former Obama Deputy Homeland Security Secretary and CNN analyst Juliette Kayyem, the same person who went nanny bonkers over the Southwest Air Let's Go Brandon incident, put it, slash the tires, empty gas tanks, arrest the drivers, and move the trucks. Any sane person should be able to see where any of these ideas would lead. The problem is we're heading into our third decade of Western leaders embracing not thinking ahead as a core national security concept. It's like these people went to anti-governing school. Sadly, I completely agree with Matt on that post there. And again, I can't help but feel like this didn't have to play out this way. And I believe that the Emergencies Act is only going to radicalize more Canadians against their government. At this point in time, I understand that. And I don't think that you're crazy for hating the government even more after these actions they're taking upon what were completely peaceful Canadians. This is from National News Watch. So I'm not going to go down conspiracy theory here. I'm just going to highlight there's some convenient timing of a couple news articles in regards to arms and the protesters and thefts and things of that nature. I'm not saying it's a Fed post. I'm not saying it's a Fed post, but one thing I'm certain, the mainstream media would never even think twice about asking that question. So this is from National News Watch. RCMP arrest 11 people, seize weapons at blockade near Alberta-U.S. border crossing. So 13 long guns, handguns, multiple sets of body armor, a machete, a large quantity of ammunition, and high-capacity magazines were seized. So again, encourage you guys to go read all of it. But understand, this appears to have happened after police sabotaged excavators. So again, I honestly don't think at this point in time anyone's ever going to really know 100% what all played out here. But police did confirm that they not only sabotaged 3 excavators that were being used in the blockade protest, but also sounds like they fiddled with some trucks as well. So again, encourage you guys, if you want to understand about the police sabotage, check out Rebel News in the video description down below. CTV News, this is a different news story now. So photographs released of suspect vehicle and theft of truck in Peterborough, Ontario with 2,000 firearms inside. And this just sounds like this is a fucking clown world. So police have not said why 2,000 firearms were inside the truck and where they were being shipped to in the first place. So far, the investigation is leaning toward an isolated crime of opportunity rather than a targeted incident, officials said in a statement. again, this could just be a sequence of unusual events that align weirdly, but I've never heard of anything like this ever happening before in Canada. I imagine that there is rules and regulations around moving 2,000 firearms in a truck. And it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out. And I hope we don't see this just disappear into the ether. I do look forward to understanding what the hell went down in Peterborough, because that shit blows my mind. Now, let's move on to a couple lighter points, and then I'm going to wrap things up. This was from Michael Malice. Prediction. After the mess Trudeau is making with the Freedom Convoy 2022, Canada will not elect another black prime minister in our lifetime. Think about all the disservice he's doing to people in blackface right now. Then we've got this. This is from the Asian white supremacist, Matt Sim, of The Great Resist. Perfect summary. If you allow the government to break the law because of an emergency, they will always create an emergency to break the law. If you allow the government to break the law because of an emergency, they will always create an emergency to break the law. That feels like it really sums up this moment in time. We're seeing so many other countries opening back up, returning to at least a semblance of normal. We're even seeing individual provinces make steps towards that. And yet the Canadian federal government has hold the line on mandates no matter what. We don't need to give you a timeline. We don't need to give you metrics or an understanding of when and how we'll decide to release you from our mandates and when we'll decide to maybe give you back your charter freedoms. And then finally, want to highlight this from Stephen Punwazi. So too long didn't read Canada's money laundering problem. 10 million raised by people criticizing Liberals, and Liberals are eyeing them. Meanwhile, 113 billion in money laundered with CISA saying billions used in state-sponsored attack using housing markets. So again, this is a great thread. Stephen's always doing a fantastic breakdown of everything related to the money laundering and real estate scandal going on here in Canada. I really encourage you guys to spend some time and dig into not only this thread, but all of his content. But this meme really does feel like it highlights perfectly what's going on right now. And again, understand that our finance minister seems completely unconcerned about the money laundering going on in real estate, instead 100% focused on what's going on with people criticizing the Liberal government. And then finally, in addition to me rambling on to you guys about your need to start learning about Bitcoin, I also want to try and give you one other piece of homework, and that's to read Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience. I actually read this live on my former YouTube channel, the Canadian Real Estate channel, during the new mandates that were implemented in 2021, around the same time that I did the free Bitcoin conference and made the Bitcoin guide, because I started to realize that, I just started to realize, our government's so much more corrupt. The individuals representing it are either so incompetent, they're so corrupt that it's hard for me to almost want to give any of them the benefit of the doubt. And in fact, I actually put in the video description down below 3 politicians in Canada that I think are actually worth giving the benefit of the doubt to. And that's Maxime Bernier, that's Randy Hillier, and Roman Baber. Outside of those 3, it's hard for me to want to give any of them the benefit of the doubt. Pierre Poilievre is maybe flirting with me giving him the benefit of the doubt. I think whether we see him continue to support the truckers and removing the mandates, or whether we see him tuck tail. I know that he released a press release in the hallways of the parliament earlier today. That definitely looked bullish for freedom and him continuing to press on for the fight for freedom. But understand that it really only seems like Max, Randy, and Roman have been fighting for an extended period of time. Almost every other politician only started moving in the direction of individual freedoms after they understood that it was starting to look politically expedient for them to do so. So that's where we are, Canada. Again, don't downplay what's going on here. Don't think that you can just ostrich this and stick your head in the sand and just keep ignoring it. A lot of us, and to a certain extent, myself included, for the last 2 years have been doing that. And it's done none of us any good. Now, again, I don't want you to just be paralyzed with fear or black pills either. I think that 2 things, you can be focusing on 2 things in parallel right now. One of them is getting your shit in order. So whether that's getting your personal health in order, your personal finances, or ideally both of them in order, that's more important than ever before. In addition to getting your personal relationships in order, right? Having a strong social safety network, right? A social network is actually the greatest form of wealth that you can have in these sort of uncertain times we find ourselves in, these unprecedented, uncertain times. On the flip side, we all need to continue fighting and speaking out for freedom, because the politicians have no interest in giving it back to us unless they believe it's going to cost them something, unless they believe it's going to cost them their positions, unless they think it's going to cost them their prestige, unless they think it's going to cost them, I won't get into Fed posting on this, but it's important that all of us speak out, that all of us continue to support the truckers in whatever way we believe is right, and to not be bullied by our government. And I only hope that whether it's days, weeks, months, or years from now, we'll look back on hindsight and see that this was a turning point when Canadians decided to stop fucking around and get serious about their individual freedoms. I really appreciate you guys. I'm going to quickly check in on the comment section and see what you guys had to say. And again, and appreciate everyone that smash the like button, shares this on social, all that good stuff. But again, I really appreciate those of you that were going out on the weekends, risking your jobs, risking your personal being doxxed, right, by donating or by just being willing to stand in a crowd of other freedom-loving Canadians. Yeah, thank you guys. I really do appreciate all of you. Peter's in the chat. We've got John Joyce. Interesting one, that's for sure. Absolutely. We've got Al, fucking Trudeau, man. This war against the people is going to be measured in years. I hope you're wrong, but I think that we all should be prepared for that and agree with you, Al. Kyle says the proverbial human excrement could quite possibly strike the proverbial electric pneumatic oscillating device in the near future. Yes, I agree. Shit could be hitting the fan sooner and in a greater degree than any of us would like. John says, although I'm U.S. and not Canadian, I take this as if it was my own country. I think it's disturbing how close these mandates in the world look to total communism. The government has too much power for me. 100% agree. And again, I think that I completely agree with that perspective, John. You know what? Americans, does this directly impact you today? No. But this is setting dangerous precedents that I have no doubt at different times you'll see American governors and senators looking to implement in their own states, that you'll eventually see federal politicians looking to implement on a federal level in the U.S. as well. John says, it's most unsettling how little people see a problem with what's going on with COVID mandates and something like this now, and not a peep out of the citizens I see on a daily basis. Absolutely. And that's why it's more important than ever before that we stand up and speak out, because that's what creates common knowledge. That's what gives your fellow citizens the confidence and the courage to actually stand up and speak out, right? We may not like it that a lot of people are going to wait to see what others do before they react, but understand that people are watching, the silent majority, right? They're watching to see, is there enough momentum here? Is there enough critical mass? Am I risking something unnecessarily by trying to support freedom in this moment? And as I mentioned on Friday, it's not going to get easier. Literally, it will never be easier to fight for your freedom than it is today. Because every single day that we let go by without freedom is one more day of it being normalized for the vast majority of Canadians. Al says, thanks for supporting words, John. Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Benjamin says, I have a hard time believing those votes. Yeah, 2 weeks. LOL, says John. Yeah, you're okay. Yeah, sorry about the audio issue there, guys. That was 100% my bad. Al says, how can a human soul delve that deep into empty nothingness? 100% agree. Nathan says, Freeland's body language was just so freaking odd. Yeah, like maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it literally feels like she's smirking, right? And if it wasn't for the fact that she was our deputy prime minister, I would want to see Trudeau step down immediately. But then I look at Freeland and I'm like, oh, wait, you're even deeper in the World Economic Forum? You're even closer buddies with Klaus Schwab? Yeah. We just need a whole fucking do-over. Can we just hit the hard reset button, go back to 2019? And I promise that I suspect you guys will all pay a lot more fucking attention to what goes on if we've got the benefit of hindsight. Max says, this tyrant is not working for Canadians. He is owned by the World Economic Forum, doing everything in his power to push their agenda. Completely agree with you there, Mac. And again, if I want to be blue pilled about this or red pilled, I'm going to say that they think it's in our own best interest. And that's why they support the World Economic Forum. If I want to be black pilled or clown pilled, well, I'm not going to give them nearly the same benefit of the doubt in that regards. We got Peter transfers all savings into Bitcoin. Again, I'm not saying that you guys should do that, but if you do decide to transfer a significant portion of your savings into Bitcoin, please, study and learn what cold storage is. And I strongly encourage you to take self-custody of your keys, your coins, right? As they say in the Bitcoin world, not your keys, not your coins. So again, if you don't even know what that means, first understand what that is before you transfer your entire net worth into Bitcoin. John says, if you have illegal thoughts, you can't have money. We're not too far off from that, it feels like. Peter says, wait until they freeze bank accounts over anything you've said on social media, whether publicly or private messages. Absolutely agree. And again, this is where we get into beyond the slippery slope. It's very quickly going to be any sort of parody, any sort of comedy will also be barred, in my opinion. This is definitely a moment in time where we all need to have courage. Al says, the doublespeak hypocrisy is enraging. Yes, sorry, I thought you said engaging. I was like, I guess it's engaging, but no, it's enraging. You're right. Peter says, she basically said, get back to tolling all our stuff, you silly plebs. Lucky enough to still have a legitimate job. Yeah, I understand that there's like, hey, you know what? If you don't do exactly as we say, we'll just absolutely destroy your livelihood, right? And yet understand that we just saw recently, like in the last week, and we covered this last week on the Maple Pill, we literally saw, was it CP Rail announced that they weren't going to press any charges against the individuals that were responsible for shutting down the rail lines back last year's protest. Now, again, I'm not saying that those individuals should be charged, but understand that the government is, it frustrates me to no end when I see the left or the mainstream media claiming how the truckers are being handled with kitty gloves. And then I actually look at past protests and I'm like, wait, they actually destroyed monuments, right? They actually like toppled shit. That one dude literally teabagged John A. McDonald's statue after the head broke off. They literally blocked down and shut down infrastructure as well, the rail lines. They maybe weren't as successful or didn't do it on as large of a scale, but they absolutely had similar intentions. And then we see CP Rail say, we're not going to charge you whatsoever. Meanwhile, the Canadian federal government is like, we will destroy you. We will destroy your business. We will seize your assets. This is serious shit. These are people's livelihoods that you already put in jeopardy by implementing these mandates. And now you're doubling down on trying to destroy their livelihoods. Understand that when someone has nothing to lose, that's when they're their most dangerous. And I don't want to see Canadians put in that position where they've got nothing to lose and thus they feel like they need to act out or act violently. I've never been more proud of my fellow Canadian citizen, or at least the fringe minority of Canadian citizens, than I have been in the last couple of weeks. But I've also never been more ashamed of my government. And there's a real dichotomy there that's difficult for me to come to terms with. Jeff Wood says, and they never follow the money when it comes to government corruption. 100% agree, Jeff. And again, the We Charity scandal is a perfect example of that, where it's like, oh, yeah, sure, we gave you $43 million, and sure, you kind of gave my family back 1% of that in free shit and free trips and speaker fees, but that's just normal shit, right? No, it's not fucking normal shit. No one's friends and family just get like $400,000 in free travel and free or in like paid speaking fees. That like the level of privilege that these elites politicians have, and yet they look down upon us. And how dare you want to be able to travel across the border unimpeded? How dare you want to go into a restaurant and not have to wear a mask, right? How dare you financially support protesters that we disagree with? We are in such big trouble. Yeah, it definitely, we're at a point of inflection, Jennifer, and I still believe that we've got the opportunity here to change things, but they're not just going to choose to do an about face, right? The government, the politicians, the administration, the corporate mainstream media, legacy press, they're not going to do a 180 unless they believe there's going to be consequences for them. And yeah, it's, again, with hindsight, we'll know how this all plays out, but it's difficult to not be extremely frustrated in this moment in time. But again, for those of you that maybe feel adrift, right? Maybe you feel lost at sea, start focusing on what you can control, right? you can control whether you decide to speak out or not. Again, whether that's literally starting an anonymous Twitter account, whether that's having tough conversations with friends or family, whether that's starting to find new friends, right, that actually understand your desire for individual freedom and autonomy, focusing on getting your financial house in order, right? If you're in crazy consumer debt, start getting rid of that, right? Like literally look at getting out of debt as one of the biggest FUs you could give to the World Economic Forum, right? And the debt slavery that they want to see all of us essentially forced into through their fiat monetary policies. Understand that in my opinion, by collecting some sats, by buying some Bitcoin, and you don't need to buy a whole Bitcoin, guys, right? You can buy tiny little fractions. You can buy like 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. And that to me is, again, a giant middle finger to the establishment. It's a giant middle finger to those that believe that you're an asset of the government rather than the government actually being a tool that's supposed to serve you. Al says, there is nothing more permanent in this world than that of government temporary measures. 100% agree. Always loved that quote. 1971, RCMP broke into the storage facilities of Rochelle Explosives, stole dynamite. 1972 officer had 4 cases of dynamite in Mount St. George in an attempt to link the explosive with the Quebec FLQ. Oh, wow. If that's, I'm definitely not as familiar with all that stuff. So, appreciate you sharing that. I'll definitely try and do some research and get a better understanding of that because that is fascinating to hear. You could end up before a firing squad just for speaking against them like this. Again, understand that like those emergency acts are pretty all-encompassing, right? And I encourage you guys, go read Section 8 so you actually understand. At the same time, I do understand that I saw some pretty aggressive hot takes on Twitter, right? People were like, so the Canadian government essentially banned crypto. No, that's FUD, right? That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt that people are spreading. Again, they're saying they want to monitor essentially all crypto and financial transactions, which again feels like it's infringing upon our individual freedoms and financial sovereignty. And yeah, I think we need to push back on any and all their intentions, but at the same time, I don't want to see anyone going too far to the extreme in the other direction because I think it does a disservice because what they're doing already is freaking extreme, and we can just focus on being accurate and displaying and laying out for people what's going on. Nathan says, what do you think about people that raise the point about Bitcoin that is ultimately trackable and could be used and seized by the government just as easy down the road? So Nathan, again, if you've got your keys, they're either going to have to torture you or find where you stored your keys. So that's not the same as taking like digital zeros out of a bank account, right? It's again a lot harder for them to seize your Bitcoin if it's in self-custody than it is for them to seize your gold, right, or your silver, or your physical land. So while again, can Bitcoin be tracked depending upon exactly how you're utilizing it? Yes. And probably for the vast majority of people watching this, you probably are getting KYC Bitcoin, so it probably is being tracked. But there's things that in theory you could do to obfuscate it once you get a hold of it, right? Also, hey, like just going on the record right now, I lost all my Bitcoin in a tragic boating accident. And again, maybe you guys like boating. We've got boats here at the Citadel. It's really easy to accidentally drop your USB key into the lake or ocean and have it disappear forever. So again, there's probably never going to be an absolutely perfect store of wealth that's perfectly designed in every aspect, right? Because again, with Bitcoin, you could forget your keys and now you're essentially never going to be able to access it again. So understand that when you do get into Bitcoin and self-custody, you're literally becoming your own bank. But I'd much rather be my own bank than depend upon bankers. Good Luck says, the best advice I'll give you in the present situation is for you to okay. I'm not sure if this is spam or not, so I'm just going to skip it, but maybe there's good intentions there. Al says, Nathan, yes, is very trackable if they get a hold of your wallet address, but it'll be very difficult for the government to seize, confiscate it. Yeah, I agree with that. Girls just know, do you only support Bitcoin or do you invest in other crypto? So for the purposes of this, I'm really just going to support Bitcoin. Again, those of you that want to get more advanced and look into other coins and things like that, feel free to, but understand that, in my opinion, there's only one virgin birth, and that's Bitcoin. Everything else came after the fact, and because of that, there's usually different complications or insiders or other concerns that individuals have in that regard. And certainly while I dabble and play in NFTs and goof around in that shit, understand that for me, that's a completely different asset class than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is really onto itself. You recently sold your real estate portfolio. Is this because the government is making it so hard to make money in real estate? That's part of it. That definitely played a factor there. I don't like what's going on in Canada. I don't like the inflation we're experiencing. I am concerned of hyperinflation or stagflation. I'm concerned of the economic pressures, right? I'm concerned about how addicted to cheap debt our entire economy is. And honestly, I didn't want to participate in it anymore. And I did well for myself. And again, this is going to sound like no true Scotsman sort of argument or something like that. But when I was doing it in real estate, I literally felt like you could have a good business plan and make money doing it. Now I feel like those with good business plans almost suffer more than those that are just gambling speculators. And while again, like all the power to you guys, if you guys want to go invest in real estate, I'm not saying you shouldn't. Again, I think that lots of people will make lots of money in real estate this year and for the foreseeable future. But for me, the biggest reason why I sold all my real estate is because I wanted to focus on fighting what I consider the culture wars. That's me creating the maple pill. That's me. I'm putting together. It's taken way longer than it should, but I'm putting together a script for a cartoon show that I'm going to self-fund, right? An animation. At least the pilot episode. Maybe we'll try and do like something to raise money, or maybe I'll just get addicted to wanting to make more episodes of it. I want to help. I want to write books. I want to help others write books. And I really just want to help push the cause of liberty, individual freedom, and sovereignty in Canada and across the world. And for me, it was going to be difficult to do that while also having my real estate portfolio for two reasons. One, dividing my attention. And the other reason is essentially when I've got business partners, when I've got mortgages or loans at banks, again, we're already seeing the government cracking down on what they believe to be bad actors, freezing their bank accounts and shit. What would happen if I was a front spokesperson for the trucker convoy and all of a sudden they decide to freeze my assets, right? Or if the banks all decide to call my mortgages, that would put me in a terrible, vulnerable position. It would, harm any business partners that I had or anything of that nature. So, honestly, I'm probably not going to make the same amount of money as some of my peers that continue in real estate. And that's not me throwing shade at anyone. That's just me looking at it openly and honestly and with, no goggles on. And I'm okay with that because literally for me at this moment in time, what's more important to me is making sure that my nieces and nephew are able to grow up in a version of Canada where they can still succeed, where they can still take on risks and receive rewards for doing so, where they still exist in a meritocracy, right? The rewards, the bold, the passionate, the hardworking. And honestly, right now, the trajectory we're on, I don't believe that that's going to be the case unless more of us stand up, more of us focus on fighting this culture war. I've gone on tangents about in the past, so I won't take too long here, but understand that politics is actually downstream of culture. So the only reason I believe outside of those three politicians I named earlier, we see any politicians now standing up for freedoms and being anti-mandates and anti-lockdowns is simply because they understand that the political tides are shifting. They're seeing that, oh shit, it looks like we maybe pushed the plebs a little too far, and now at least more than a fringe minority of them are upset. And I want to help encourage and empower more individuals to speak out. And so that's the main reason that I got out of my real estate portfolio. I hope that makes sense. It wasn't too rambly. Yazzie Bro says, always avoid proffer investment advice. Okay. I'm not sure what that means. Jean says they are not statesmen. A statesman think about the future of the nation, not to his personal interest or the group he secretly pledged allegiance to. I agree with that. Leah says two manufacturers close to Peterborough. Yeah. Mic drop by the Asian white supremacist. Agree. Smells like a false flag coming. Antifa and are anti-cops, so it will be easy to disguise some in white supremacists and kill a couple of off. Yeah, I really hope we don't see anything like that. But like I said, I am just suspicious of the timing of some of these things. But again, we'll see how it all plays out. I really hope that any of my concerns are unplaced and unwarranted, and that turns out I'm just too black-pilled. Brad Hooton says Bitcoin is our lifeboat. I definitely agree with that sentiment. If worse comes to worse, crossing borders with Bitcoin is going to be a lot easier than with pounds of gold. Hey, what's up, Lisa? Appreciate the support in the comment section. Yeah, I also agree with this statement. Nothing to fear except fear itself. So I don't want people to be fearful, but I do want them to be aware, right? And if you're frustrated or fearful in moments, it's okay. Let that wash over you. Regroup, refocus, and figure out what can you control. Where can you take back individual power from? Leah D says there are 2 gun manufacturers. Yep, gotcha. Graham says rumors are the missing truck full of guns originated at Kodiak Defense Inc., a firearms manufacturer located in Oldcastle, Ontario. Rumors only. Appreciate you sharing that. Tor says there is a simple explanation for Convoy funding. Canadians living abroad are horrified at what is going on back home, so they have donated to the cause for fear of Canada's authoritarian dictator. Yeah, that's a great one. I didn't even touch upon that, but appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, otherwise, really appreciate you guys watching this video. Again, those of you sharing, liking, all that good stuff. If you guys hate watching this on Big Tech, which is Facebook and YouTube where I live stream, I don't blame you. Reminder, I'm always uploading the replays to BitChute and to Rumble. So you can find me there, Matt McKeever Unfiltered, or you can just search The Maple Pill. Again, really appreciate every one of you freedom-loving Canadians that are speaking out, that are fighting the good fight, because it's more important than ever before. And like I said, it's not going to get easier. So if you've been on the fence, I implore you, figure out where your line in the sand is and then stand behind it, right? And stand up for it. Far too many people are thinking, when it gets really bad, I'll step up and speak out. But what does that even mean, right? At that point in time, when you're like, when it gets really bad and you're being very vague with your terms, you're no better than the government, which is like, yeah, we'll ease up on mandates probably someday. We'll see how it plays out. Again, I'm just done with this shit. At the same time, I'm not done with Canada. I'm not giving up on Canada. I hope I never have to. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll be back to a more normal episode of the Maple Pill where I'll give you your full course of pills. We'll cover some blue pills, some red pills, some black pills, some clown pills, and with some white pills where we can focus on some positivity or some good news. And as always, if you guys have good news or any stories you want to see me cover, there's a link in the video description down below to the Problems for Profits Discord. That's the best place to make story recommendations. There's a separate channel called Maple Pill, and really appreciate those of you that do engage, that share resources there. And yeah, appreciate you guys. I won't be doing a mailbag episode tonight because, one, I didn't get any mail. So reminder, if you guys want to just hang out with me on Monday nights, all you need to do is send me a physical postcard or a handwritten letter or anything. Again, mailing address is in the video description down below. But I was probably going to go live anyways, but honestly, I'm just so hot about what's going on right now that it would just be more of me ranting about the government. And again, while that's sometimes cathartic for me, it also, too much ranting about the government isn't good. As one of the previous commenters said, nothing to fear but fear itself. But if we focus too much on just ranting about the government rather than focus on doing some solutions, it's easy for us to accomplish nothing in a day. So appreciate you guys. Go accomplish something. Go learn about Bitcoin if you haven't done so. And if you have, do the homework assignments and read Civil Disobedience by Thoreau. It's a timeless piece. And again, if you don't want to read it, go find me reading it. Just Google probably Matt McKeever Civil Disobedience. I think that'll come up in your YouTube search results. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, guys.